let's look at the rest of the bracket here. So those are those two games that you see. The quarterfinals are set. Not set, though, for Newman-Goretti, and not set for Roman Catholic, the 2 seed. Newman-Goretti knows that they will play the lowest seeded team. So that's Bonner Prendergast, Archbishop Carroll, or Father Judge. Roman could play Cardinal O'Hara, Archbishop Carroll, or Father Judge. The only one they could not play is Bonner Prendergast. So when we talk to our next guest, we won't be able necessarily to talk about a specific matchup or their expected opponent. Though, whether it is a team like Archbishop Carroll or Father Judge, those teams can shoot the lights out. And Roman just came off of a loss where St. Joe's Prep did just that, shut the lights out. We know that both those teams can do that. And then Cardinal O'Hara, same thing. I mean, either way and any way you slice it, Roman Catholic, Will, is going to have to shoot the ball well and is going to have to coerce turnovers against some of these younger teams to come away with a victory in the quarterfinal round.
Yeah, there's no doubt. When I think about Roman, something I think about is kind of their adaptability. We broadcasted a game against Devon Prep where they played the entire game at, quote, Devon speed, and they won the game by 18. I mean, in the second half, they dominated, but playing that speed. With Anthony Finkley and Sharif Jackson, they can play the inside game. With Xavier Brown, they can play the transition game. With Eric Oliver Bush and Jeremiah Stewart Herring, those guys are two-way players, like the definition of two-way players. So Roman, of course, can knock down threes. Xavier's pretty good at it. Ant Finkley's very good at it. And Eric Oliver Bush is a pretty good catch-and-shoot guy as well. Yeah. So Roman, can they knock down threes? Absolutely. And after losing to St. Joe's Prep, it's not a horrible loss to get them ready for the playoffs.
Not at all. They are locked in because Archbishop would play St. Joe's Prep. We mentioned that earlier in the show. So they will go to the district tournament and will go to the state tournament. And that loss sets them up now where, again, that they wouldn't have been the 1 seed by virtue of Newman-Goretti's win against Roman Catholic. But they do reset. And I think a key will be the sophomore Sharif Jackson. You mentioned, I think everybody but him, but Finkley, experience, tough. He can really handle the basketball, point forward, willing passer, excellent three-point shooter at his size. Xavier Brown, 1,000-point scorer, the conductor, the engineer, if you will, runs the offense with precision. And then Eric Oliver Bush, Jeremiah Stewart Herring, they do a great job, both of them. Stewart Herring has had huge games. He's likely going to be on an all-Catholic team of some kind. Oliver Bush, fantastic, can really throw it down. A heck of a defensive player as well.
And rebounder.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I agree. And this Roman team is one of the better half-court defensive teams that I've seen in recent history with the Cahillites. They're a great offensive team, but I could argue the Lamar Stevens, Tony Carr teams, even Seth Lundy-led teams, with Jalen Duran involved and Justice Williams while they were here, Hakeem Hart, right? I think those teams were arguably more talented offensively. But not by much, first and foremost. Not by much. They're incredibly talented. This defensive unit, there's been a commitment there, a renewed commitment to the defensive end that I think puts them as arguably the best half-court defense in the league.
And they ask a lot out of their players. They ask Sharif Jackson and Anthony Finkley to hedge high ball screens, and they do it with precision and with it's obviously an attention to detail in practice. And it's something we talked to Xavier Brown about. What they do in practice to prepare for games, and then what that game experience does. And you see it manifested in their record.
You're absolutely right. So they will have a home game. It'll be played at Holy Family University. They've been splitting time between Jefferson University, Holy Family University. They played but one game on campus at Roman Catholic. What a great experience that is. I still consider myself very lucky to have called a game at Roman Catholic, and regardless of what they do with that gym, if they ever do look to expand it, happy that we had that experience and we got that on film. But we have a special guest here. Chris McNesby, he was more than happy to spend time with us. But when I recommended, hey, are there any assistants you wanted to get involved, one name came to mind, Dan Hoban. Dan Hoban is the game day coordinator for Roman Catholic. He basically handles anything that is needed in preparation for the game on game day as they're preparing for that. But What else does he do? He is the public address announcer for Roman Catholic football and basketball. He does a tremendous job and has been doing that for decades. And as of about, well, I don't know, it was 15 years ago or whenever it might have been, he became the voice of the PCL at the Palestra, the public address announcer that you know and love when you go to a Catholic League semifinal or final at the Palestra. Without further ado, here's our good buddy, Dan Hoban from Roman Catholic.
Dan Hoban is our next guest here on the Philadelphia Catholic League preview show on Bob Long Sports. He has a distinguished resume. He is game day coordinator at Roman Catholic, but also is the voice you hear at the Palestra every year over the public address, and also the voice you hear as public address for Roman Catholic basketball and football every year. Dan, thanks for doing this for us. This is an exciting time of year, and Roman is right back where they expect to be, which is right near the top of the Catholic League.
Well, it's I always say it's it used to be March Madness in the pre-PIAA years, but now it's February Madness, and obviously you want to be playing your best basketball this time of the year.
Well, and Roman, certainly doing that. They're going to be the 2 seed in the Catholic League as part of this Monday night preview show. We don't have a particular opponent to preview here, Dan, but we can talk about the Roman Catholic Cahillites and what they've been able to do so well. I think it starts with Xavier Brown, who scored his 1,000th point. Bob Long Sports was thrilled to be in the building and to be able to capture that moment. Becomes, I believe, the 19th player to join that club. What's that say about that young man and for you, having spent 4 years watching him?
Well, actually, I did some of my research, and that was an error on my part. He's actually the 22nd player to score 1,000 points at Roman Catholic, and besides his expertise on the court, he's an absolutely phenomenal young man. And to see him get his 1,000th point, especially when you think about it, his sophomore year, we probably lost the opportunity to play 15 to 18 games because of the shortened COVID season. We only played 12 games that year. So X would have had, his 1,000th point potentially last year. But, he has a great future ahead of him, heading to Hawk Hill, along with one of his best friends and teammates, Anthony Finkley. But, how X goes is how we go. I think he will admit that he did not have one of his better games the other night at St. Joseph's Prep, but he rebounded yesterday with a very good outing against a very talented Archbishop Carroll team.
And I got to see that Archbishop Carroll team, and we'll actually be broadcasting that game on Wednesday when they take on Father Judge. I think we're liable to see 30-plus threes between those two teams in that game, the way those two teams can shoot it.
Yeah, there's two teams that aren't afraid to put it up.
Yep, no doubt about it. But you mentioned Finkley, and I do want to touch on him because so rarely do you see a big man that is as skilled with the basketball as he is, willing passer, can get to the rim, but also drives to kick and find his teammates as well. Pretty good three-point shooter. And then, of course, the wide body speaks for itself. He has some serious talent.
Yeah, I think that, at the high school level, he presents a matchup problem. Similar to, but not quite the same game as like Lamar Stevens. But very excellent passer of the basketball, always has his head up, always looking for the next play. I particularly like the way he and Sharif Jackson work together, especially in a high-low setting.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And Jackson, the sophomore, coming along quite well, continuing to improve on those moves inside. He's also a very good passer, Dan. And I'm intrigued as to where you think his ceiling is, because only a sophomore and having the opportunity to play the likes of Sultan Adewale and Thomas Sorber and Tristan Gillowette week to week to week, how important that is for a sophomore.
Well, it's amazing how, and they say in the game of basketball right now, the traditional big man doesn't exist anymore. Well, we've got, 4 outstanding ones in the Catholic League, with Sultan and with Tristan and with Thomas Sorber, at Ryan. That people think that the game of basketball at the big man level is dead. Well, I'm still a believer that the game's still played inside out.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you guys will host a playoff game at is it at Holy Family? Is this where it'll be?
I believe so. Brian Haas told me yesterday that Jefferson was unavailable because I believe they host some of the PCL girls basketball playoff games, so that might be a conflict. But
tell me about playing at those two venues, though. You've had to basically split. I think you played 1 or 2 games at home as well, and when you had the opportunity.
Just one at Roman this year. One at Roman this year, and I'm a sentimental guy. I mean, I was crawling around that gym when my Uncle John was Speedy's assistant back in the day, but very sentimental about playing at Roman. But as the game's played today, obviously with the 3-point shot, and quite honestly, we're a better team on a bigger floor, so we can get out and run. But I call it the CACC tour this year between playing at Holy Family and Jefferson, and obviously both athletic departments have been fantastic hosting this. So we're very grateful.
That's great. That is great. And you mentioned getting out and running, Dan. This team, excellent in transition. It is a hallmark of Roman Catholic basketball teams that I've seen in years past. I won't say the difference because I know you guys have had great teams in this regard in years past, but what really stands out to me this year is the commitment to the defensive end of the basketball. In the defensive half court, the ability to get stops, create turnovers, which allows you to run as effectively as you do. That's something that stood out to me, and I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I definitely think that defense is the key because it's about Chris always preaches all the time about getting stops, getting rebounding the basketball, getting out into a transition game. Because if you don't get stops, other teams are going to just pack in a zone, and now we have to play at a half court. And I'll be totally honest, St. Joseph Prep did an outstanding job with their zone against us the other night. And we know as a team, if we don't get out and if we don't create stops, rebound the basketball, and get up the floor, that we're going to see that throughout the playoffs.
Newman Goretti has been a longtime rival of you guys, and you guys have basically traded Catholic League titles since Kingdom Come, right? And you guys could be on a collision course again. I think there are 9 or 10 teams that can realistically make the Palestra this year. The league is that good and that deep. So we're not previewing anything down the line, but the matchup you had earlier this year, what stood out and what could be a difference when you guys would have the opportunity to see each other again?
Well, I think, and Carl does an outstanding job, 12 Catholic League championships. How can you saying anything negative about Newman Goretti's program? I mean, they definitely, one of the things that really stood out for me, especially last year at the Palestra, X got a couple early fouls. We couldn't play our press. We had to go zone, and they shot the lights out of it. And, they have outstanding shooters. They're all capable of making plays. And then you got Sultan in the middle that's extremely talented. They're just a complete basketball team. And, Robert Wright's going to Baylor. So, it's something to be said about that. And they have outstanding players all around him. So I thought, playing at Newman, which is a very difficult place to play, the atmosphere in South Philly, it was, I drove through the parking lot twice trying to get a spot. It didn't work. But we hurt ourselves at the foul line, taking nothing away from the Saints' effort. We hurt ourselves at the foul line. So, and we had to do a better job of that if we want to be fortunate enough to come away with a victory. Obviously, they've all played in the Palestra, so they know what that atmosphere is like. So that's going to be a huge task for anybody that's going to face them in the playoffs.
One more before we get to your experience at the Palestra. The 6A classification has been so interesting this year, and I'll say it's unfortunate. Not that there needs to be a change, but that with this year's iteration of teams, it's unfortunate that there's one automatic bid from the Catholic League and one play, and that the Catholic League has historically been very successful in, right? The second Catholic League team against the second public league team for the third spot. Well, this year, Roman Catholic, St. Joe's Prep, and Archbishop Wood. And that's been something we've been following all year long, where if none of the three you guys were lined up in the first round, you guys wouldn't necessarily be safe. You'd need to win that first game at least to get to the flush to lock up your spot. Not the case this year, as Wood will play St. Joe's Prep. That game will be broadcast on Bob Long Sports, a 4-5 matchup. So you guys know that you guys are on to it, a district title opportunity and then an opportunity to play for the states. How do you guys look at that? Is it 3 different seasons, Catholic League, and then a district title, and then states is separate altogether, or is it part of one process as you guys look at it in paradigm?
Well, I think you have to approach everything one game at a time. Obviously, going into the season, our number one priority, as any program in the Catholic League, our number one priority is and always will be the Catholic League. I think it's unique in Philadelphia. And if you ask any coach or player in the Catholic League, what's more important, PCLs or states? And I think anyone will say PCLs no matter what. And that's unique in Philadelphia. Chris did a heck of a job last year of getting our guys to rebound after an unfortunate, loss in the semis last year to, the champion Newman Goretti. Did a great job of getting our kids to, get fired up and go after a state title. And we were fortunate to come away against an excellent Archbishop Wood team. But I think that, it's almost like a second season once you roll into states. But I think, like I said, to a man, I think you ask anyone, that the Catholic League is and always will be the end all be all of Philly basketball.
Dan Hoban is our guest, game day coordinator and voice at the Palestra that you hear for Catholic League title games and semifinals. One more before we get to that, because you mentioned Chris McNesby. We haven't had the opportunity to talk about him yet on this interview. You've been with the program for decades at this point. And so to see some of the iterations of coaches, great ones that have come before Chris McNesby, and then Chris made the jump to spend more time with his family in 2016. Matt Griffin, I believe, came in at that point, has done a great job, and now his college career is blossoming. Mm-hmm. Chris McNesby comes back to take over the program. What has that been like? What are some of the differences between these coaches and how it's thrust the program forward every step of the way?
Well, one of the unique things about Roman, especially like when, for example, I was doing a home game a couple of years ago, and I'm sitting at midcourt at the table, running the clock and announcing the game, and our president, Father Joe Bungard, was sitting next to me, and he said to me, Dan, can you name another program in the Catholic League where 2 former Hall of Fame coaches are at the game? So, Chris with his business schedule was able to make this is before Chris came back. And when Chris was at the game, and obviously, my mentor and dear friend Dennis Seddon, is that not only is he at every game, he's at every practice. Mm-hmm. I tease him and I call him director of basketball operations all the time. But but like I said, at Roman, it's definitely a family, and Chris and then Matt before him, always have a mentor in Coach Seddon. Coach sits in the corner and has his little notepad, and he jots things down that he sees, and he shares them with the coaching staff. And as a coach, couldn't ask for anything better.
That's great. It's great to see him back, and he's a tremendous individual as well, and we enjoy every opportunity to connect with him. So now the fun part, Dan. You're the voice at the Palestra that everybody hears over the public address. You've been doing public address, as you mentioned, for decades. What is that experience like when you get to the Palestra? Is it a little bit different than everything else you do?
Always, it's different to be fortunate enough. Back in 2007, our athletic director, my good friend Dave Falcione, was the head of the athletic directors, and he, shocked me. He said, "You're going to do the Palestra this year," and I was, And the first time I did it, I don't think I could get my heart rate below 180. But the way I described it, somebody said, well, what's it like? I said, well, I've never played Augusta National, but I imagine it's probably pretty close. And I tell people all the time, I have best seat in the house, first row, midcourt. And, if you're outside of Philadelphia, you just don't understand what the Palestra is like. I tell people from all around the country, I said, only in Philadelphia can you put over 9,000 people in that building for a high school game. I mean, unfortunately, we're outdrawing Big Five games now in that building. But I think the Archdiocese did a study, I think it was last year or the year before, where they took the attendance of all the major Division I college conference championship games, and the Catholic League finished like 7th or 8th as far as attendance goes. But it's the best, and I kind of channel my announcing mentor John McAdams when I walk in that building, and like we had that conversation the other night. I use his tagline that he always used in the Palestra as my tribute to him. Mr. McAdams would say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the University of Pennsylvania's Palestra, college basketball's most historic gym." So I use that tagline as my tribute.
That's so good. That's so good, Dan. I love that. And I contend that the semifinal night and the finals night, when the girls get to play and then the boys championship is played directly following, but those 2 evenings are 2 of the best sporting events across Philadelphia all year long. College, high school, professional, you name it. 2 of the best nights of the year. And I can tell you that last Monday in February and that second to last Wednesday in February, I can tell you where I'll be for decades to come.
I think you mark that one down.
Yep. It's great. So I appreciate you doing this. It really is helpful to get some insights from every one of the 10 teams here. This one will be airing later in the show, as you guys will be sitting and waiting to see what happens on Wednesday night.
It's going to be, like I said, it's the best time of the year for Catholic League basketball. And, the great thing about our league is there's 10 outstanding teams, and it's a grind. And, especially with this, when you're sitting and waiting, you've got, potential 1 of 4 teams. So, there's going to be a lot of homework that has to be done by our great coaching staff. But like I said, there's 10 outstanding teams, there's 10 outstanding coaches, and it's Christmas time for basketball fans in Philly.
Can't wait. Thank you, Dan, for doing this. That's Dan Hoban, the game day coordinator and the voice you hear at the Palestra for the boys semifinals and the boys and girls finals. Thanks again.
And we appreciate everything you do, Bob, because you do an outstanding job. My wife watches all the games that you broadcast because she has a little bit tough schedules to make the games, but you do an outstanding job.
Much appreciated. Thanks, Dan.
Absolutely.
Dan Hoban, our guest. Will, I know you didn't get to see or hear that interview in advance, so how cool was that, the voice of the Palestra for PCL contests?
Well, I think what it shows is how many different people help make the Philadelphia Catholic League so special. Dan Hoban, obviously a great example of that and a great steward of the game. So it was just such an honor to be able to listen to that interview that you conducted with him.
Really good. And he has great insight, of course, on the Cahillites as well, as they look to make their run yet again through the Philadelphia Catholic League